I do have Dr. Zuhdi Jasser on again by popular demand. Got a lot of great feedback from having him on. I think it was last week. Dr. Jasser, thanks for joining me on Breitbart News Daily.
Oh, it's great to be with you again, Alex. Thank you.
President of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, probably the most prolific moderate Muslim spokesperson out there, which is, I always say that I want to hear from more moderate Muslims and who are reformists and want to reform the radical elements of it, and thus Dr. Jasser is on the show. Dr. J, I want to play for you this kind of crazy clip from Philadelphia that I warned you about, but I asked right before the break, do you remember when it became in vogue or even essential for particularly people on the left to announce, if you're a white person, that you have white privilege and that you're actually an oppressor? When did this seem to have come on pretty quick?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the left likes to sort of co-opt minority groups into basically blaming the majority, be it Christianity, be it whites, whatever they feel is the enemy of today, and that's exactly what they've been teaching the Islamists to do in the Muslim community.
Yeah, and it's I just think it's very divisive for us to approach each day with that outlook, that not that we're a melting pot. Even though I understand that there is some advantages that certain groups have over others. I'm not suggesting there isn't some level of racism. I'm just suggesting that it just seems like a very toxic attitude to tell particularly children to wake up every day and see who's privileged and who's less privileged, and to define yourself in that way and not think of your identity as an American identity and try to just be the best you can be and be competitive with yourself. That's the attitude that I find very confusing. I don't see how that could sell on a whole scale because it's so pessimistic.
It's un-American. And, as our founding fathers fought for freedom, religious freedom, liberty, against theocracy. At the end of the day, the American dream is a positive aspect. We can only defeat our enemies if we know what we're for. The left, I don't think, you look at all these presidential candidates, and they're from Antifa to Move On and all their organizations. They don't really know what they're for, other than confiscating our money through taxes and socialism, and also confiscating our rights. And at the end of the day, this is the reason I'm a conservative, is our movement understands what we're for. We know we're for less government interference. We're for national security. We're for equality and freedom for all. And we're for religious freedom. So, these are the things I think the left will come to terms with. And until they lose, I don't know how many elections are they going to have to figure out that they're them selling hate as a message, whether they're against it or not. It's still the message they're selling is not going to work.
All right. So, Dr. Jasser, let's play a little bit of this clip. This is a Muslim school in Philadelphia, and children start chanting this jihadist song. Memory, the Middle East Media Research Institute, unearthed this clip. And this is the Muslim American Society Islamic Center in Philadelphia, MAS Philly. This is a video of children wearing Palestinian attire and singing jihadist songs. Let's play a little bit. It's all in Arabic, but I want to hear a little bit of the texture.
واللي رضي بالذل والشهيمة وجوده واللي ما يرضى القهر بيفرض وجوده ويرد الظلم من أرض العرب.
Okay, so we get the picture. So this is one of those ones, Dr. Jasser, where I had to look at it 3 times before I assigned it to someone at Breitbart, because I couldn't believe this is happening. I didn't see it anywhere else other than Breitbart and Memory. Could you give us some context? What's happening here? Are you concerned about it? And give us the details we might be missing.
Well, listen, people see these clips and they think, oh, this is just an aberrancy. It's a one-off. And even the bizarre Philadelphia Inquirer had the temerity to have a reporter report after this was going viral, that this was the heads of the school said this was an oversight and it wasn't properly vetted. The only thing that wasn't properly vetted was that some parent posted that. And I'm glad you had people listen to it, because you can tell it's choreographed, it's coordinated. The students, as you know, any of us that have kids that are in grade school, be it 2nd, 4th, 5th grade, these things don't just happen overnight. Week after week of performances, of rehearsals. Parents were there. That videotape that was unearthed was from a Facebook page of one of the parents, and that's how it got unearthed. So
wow.
The bottom line is the Muslim American Society has 35 chapters. Among those chapters, they run a number of charter and private schools. It is, according to the Chicago Tribune, no vast right-wing conspiracy. The Chicago Tribune had a large three-part series in 2004 with an undercover Muslim reporter in one of their schools in Chicago that showed that they are clearly the mirror image, or they are the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. And that was the title of the article in the research in the Chicago Tribune, was the secretive network of Hamas funding of the Muslim American Society in the United States. And there was a school called TIZA, T-I-Z-A, Tariq Ibn Ziyad Academy in Minnesota that was shut down back a few years ago, by the way, not too far from Ilhan Omar's district. And that school was shut down by what? By the ACLU suing them because they were using tax money to force kids into prayer and doing fundamentalist Salafi jihadi type ideology. So this was also a little bit under the national radar, and that school now has shut down. A lot of their leaders have reopened institutions under other names in the area, but it shows you that this is an endemic, deep problem. And, really irritates me when the Philadelphia Inquirer covers this. They say it's an oversight, and they don't have the journalistic integrity to interview Muslims that would say, you know what, this is the problem in our communities. This is why our children are radicalized. They're singing in Arabic, the chopping of heads. They're singing in Arabic, anti-Semitic canards that are just horrific. And when a kid is talking about that and actually starts mimicking cutting heads and other things in Arabic with headdress that's Palestinian jihadist headdress, you wonder why later some of them might actually commit acts of terror.
So do you think that this is an oversight because of the same sort of political correctness that we're normalizing this? And if so, why would we, the politically correct woke crowd, why would they be okay with this form of religious fundamentalism where they wouldn't accept it from Christians or probably any other faith for that matter?
They are so invested into the exploitation of Muslims for their identity politic, the victim narrative of Muslims, rather than looking at what these groups mean globally as rockets are sent off from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other acts of terror continue to be waged against the West and against Israel. But the left here is so invested in that they will continue to keep blinders on and ignore the reality because it just doesn't serve their political purposes in their partisan obsession. So if they start unroofing the reality of these ideologies and the way women are treated in these schools, the way minorities are treated, their narrative will fall apart and they can no longer use Muslims as the victim, but rather our community ends up revealing that it actually has a deep radicalization problem. It has a theocracy problem. And if you see, just yesterday there's revealed a care operative that was supposedly working with the FBI, and now the FBI, the person that was providing information, is actually now arrested for obstructing a terrorism operation. So a lot of these organizations that the left uses, unfortunately, are a big part of the problem, and they don't want to face it.
All right, we got Dr. Zuhdi Jasser on the line. Dr. Jasser, thanks for giving me this update. Do you think that this is something that is increasing, decreasing in the United States? If so, where is it happening? If it is increasing, how come we're kind of missing the story?
Well, we're missing the story because nobody wants to connect nonviolent Islamism to violent Islamism. So this video got people's attention because you have kids talking about chopping of heads, but all the other things in that video about the supremacy of Islamic rule, the antagonism against the Jews and other things, that's ignored because it's perceived as nonviolent, but it is the gateway drug into radical Islamism. So these ideas, these movements, I believe, are increasing. They're getting actually much more brazen, as folks like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are normalizing their relationships with Hezbollah supporters, with Hamas supporters, and others that seem to now have open access into various congressional offices. So I think the amount of it hasn't changed much, but it's becoming much more prime time, if you will, because they feel unchecked, that they basically are given sort of the reign of the left, as the most radical in Congress now seem to be sort of leading the left's platforms. And I think it's good that we're covering it. I think it's good that Americans are getting an education in this. And it's time to start waking up Muslims that, you know what, if we don't start forming anti-Islamist organizations to marginalize the ideas that are being sung by these kids, to marginalize the anti-Israel narrative, to marginalize the anti-Western narrative, and begin to have our own reform-based, like our Muslim reform movement does, reform-based leaders, this is going to continue to be the reality of the American Muslim community.
So, Dr. Jasser, let's turn our focus to Israel, and we're in a ceasefire now at the moment. I don't know if it'll hold. Hopefully it does. So that's why we spent a lot of time on the show yesterday getting into the details there, but we have not spent much time on it this show. Let's talk about what's happening in your view between Israel and the Palestinians lobbing 700 rockets. A handful of people were killed, 4 or so. One weapon backfired and actually ended up killing some Palestinians. And a lot of the debate seems to be in our media whether or not the people who, in our view, in Breitbart land, we consider to be border crossers, and the left considers them to be sort of innocent protesters. And what is your vantage point there in terms of what's happening at the Israeli border? And are the Palestinians being dehumanized, as Rashida Tlaib says, or is this more akin to an invasion, the way we might describe the infiltration of our southern border in the United States?
The bottom line is, Alex, we have to know what the truth is of what's happening there. And the truth is completely ignored by the likes of Tlaib and Omar when they say they're being dehumanized. If they are being dehumanized, it's being done by their own leadership. They continue to be run by a terrorist organization that whenever it is struggling for power will throw rockets and begin to commit acts of terror against innocent Israeli citizens. Israel then has to respond in order to protect itself from an act of war. And then as a result, as Israel targets leadership in Hamas, targets folks at outposts that are shooting at Israeli soldiers, then they use images that they conjure up in order to say that they're the victims. And that's how terrorists and tyrants operate. It's Machiavellian. It is completely corrupt. So I've been talking about for years, where's the Arab awakening inside Gaza against its own militant leadership like we saw in Syria or Egypt or elsewhere, because they continue to demonize Israel and demonize the state next to them. But as you saw with Ilhan Omar's tweet, she claimed they were occupied. Gaza hasn't been occupied in over 15 years. So they're continuing to push false information. And let's not forget, this latest round of rockets were started by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Iranian the Iranian Republican Guard Corps. They've been funding them, arming them. So Iran has a lot of interest in increasing belligerence between the Israelis and the Palestinians, as they then will have more freedom to arm Hezbollah and put Syria into a position so that it can have arms that threaten Israel, and they sort of distract Israel. So that's part of the reason Palestinian Islamic Jihad did this. And they were also distracted with the peace talks that were happening in Cairo, and they sort of felt that would show another upper hand. So the Palestinians, yes, many of them are victims as they sit in their basements and Hamas is shooting rockets. But at the end of the day, it's their own leadership. It's certainly not Israel.
Great stuff from Zuhdi Jasser. Very clear analysis there. What did you make of Ilhan Omar's tweet? How many more protesters must be shot? Rockets must be fired. Little kids must be killed until the endless cycle of violence ends. The status quo of occupation and humanitarian crisis in Gaza is unsustainable. Only real justice can bring about security and lasting peace. She's all these sort of dog whistle words in there, the code words that are all platitudinal and not really substantial. But the key ones are that it's an occupied thing and it's a cycle of violence. This is all a moral equivalence. What the Hamas and Iranian-sponsored terrorists are doing is the same as what Israel's doing.
It's beyond revolting. It is. I think it's typical for a congresswoman who recently said that her hero, her idol, is Angela Davis, Angela Davis's greatest hero was Vladimir Lenin. So for somebody who loves Lenin, who was a tyrant that killed millions in genocide, I think it stands to fit that she is calling this occupation when it's not. She's just and talking about cycles of violence in which it's not. Yeah, some of her comments at the beginning of that tweet are true. Yeah, when is it going to stop? When are the rockets going to stop from Hamas? But she doesn't blame Hamas. She's clearly supporting Hamas, and that's she's asking the right question, but then does this moral equivalency, which is a propaganda fit for her idols of Angela Davis and sort of a Leninist Islamist twist on the reality and on the truth, because they always want to blame those of us in the West and democracies like Israel, and avoid the fact that their communities are led by terrorists and radicals.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, where can people find you online?
Please find me at our website at aifdemocracy.org, AIF as in forumdemocracy.org, and on Twitter at Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, DRZUHDI Jasser, JASSER.
I'd like having you on the show. Come back anytime.
Anytime. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.